taxi drivers are the most bribe payers in the country. This taxi war, it didn't start now. It started back then, when back in the days you would literally wait for a taxi for like maybe more than an hour so that the taxi could come by. And then sometimes when the taxi arrives, you find that the taxi is full, it's overloaded and stuff like that. There's no space. You heard the story where people were sitting on the engine back in the days, right? Drivers don't own the taxis. The taxi owners, they be like, nigga, I want 2K or 3K by the end of the day. How you make the money, I don't give a damn. So now it's taxi drivers fighting one another. From taxi drivers fighting one another, now it's taxi drivers fighting against Uber drivers. Uber drivers and Bolt drivers began to be like, anybody that's going to request late at night, they must pay cash. We don't give a damn if you paid via your app or you got a reward or a token whatsoever. You have to pay cash. Maybe taxi drivers are killing Uber and Bolt drivers because most of the Bolt and the Uber drivers are not from South Africa. Most of them are Nigerians. Most of them are Zimbabweans. So the Department of Road and Transport is even afraid of the taxi drivers. Because you know why? The taxi industry is run by the mafias in the country. Some of these taxis, they were bought through blood money. They were bought through money heist. So the taxi industry is a laundering business. Anybody who got more than 10 taxis, that motherfucker is laundering money through that association.
We live in a world where the system and capitalism turns a blind eye on its hoi polloi. As we all know that nothing is permanent, I welcome you all to the LungTrey segment, where we're gonna talk, share, listen and laugh if it's laughable. So sit back, relax. I'm your host, Trader Devil here. See you soon.
All right, so si live manje siyarekhoda ne yonke into on. Hayi okay, indaba mina ngithanda ukufaka lezi zinto meanwhile ngikhuluma nje, because ngicina sengifila ngathi ngenza ama reputation amaningi and ngapha I'm talking, so these things are fucking distracting me sometimes, man. And ngazi ngizoyenza kanjani, because it's the studio managers who are telling me that I have to look professional and stuff. So I'm like, and like this computer nabo bani kanti, because I'm not in a fucking competition. I'm just here to do my part and get the fuck off. So I don't know. So bona to senza kanjani, and futhi ningamangali mangesikipha lezi zinto, because shit is wild, man. Shit is wild. Me listening to myself, it's like I'm going crazy right now. My mind is buffering. I end up losing my chain of thought. So, but by the way, welcome back to the LungTrey segment. Remember, this is the segment where we're gonna be talking, listening, sharing, laughing. If it's laughable, niggas. All you all know. You gotta laugh. I mean, that's the whole point. The point is to laugh. So, but today I just want us to focus on this other controversial topic, because as you all know me, I'm a very controversial motherfucker, like I am, you know. That's like always, man. So I just want us to talk about the taxi industry in South Africa. So apparently taxi drivers are killing one another. They are fighting over routes, and at the same time they are killing Bolt drivers. So there's this taxi, not a taxi, there are these taxis that got banned last week. Yeah, last week some taxis were banned. I don't know if it was the community that banned the taxis or it was the Bolt drivers banning the taxi, but some the fact of the matter is there were taxis that were banned, and they were banned after they're saying a taxi driver killed an Uber driver. Most of the people are afraid. Most of the people are afraid of talking about the taxi saga and the taxi war in the country, because they be saying that taxi drivers are the most evil people in the country. Taxi drivers are the most ruthless people in the country. Taxi drivers are the most disrespectful people in the country. And taxi drivers are the most bribe payers in the country. And I'm not gonna lie, most of the stuff are true. And you end up realizing that those motherfuckers that are even ruthless, evil, and angry and wild, they don't even own those taxis because there's a taxi owner somewhere just chilling like a motherfucker, just waiting to be paid. So meanwhile the taxi driver is out and about cussing people out during the day, fighting other drivers. So I just want to break down a certain thing, or maybe I just want to break down the taxi industry, this country, right? So you guys need to remember that back in the days, maybe in the 1950, 1960, 1970, we didn't really rely on taxis as our source of transport, right? So most of the people who were working in the suburbs and in the cities, they didn't really use taxis as their source of transport. Maybe up until late 70s, in the 80s and in the 90s, that's where maybe taxis started to become popular even in the townships and in the rural areas, right? So back in the days, it was a white employer who would go in the township and in the rural areas to collect his or her own workers to come to work, and then later on bring them back, because as we all know that back in the days during apartheid, black people were not allowed in the suburbs and in the cities, especially late, around 5 p.m., 6 p.m. till late, So once they find you in the suburbs or in the cities at those times, they would beat you up, So as time went by, those white employers end up realizing that, sometimes it is time consuming to be going to the townships, to the rural areas to collect those people and then later on bring them back. And at the same time, you still gotta pay them. It's time consuming, it's petrol, it's diesel, whatever. And those employers, they were using vans, trucks, lorries and stuff, even maybe their private vehicles to transport those workers, right? And most of the workers were cleaners, gardeners, maybe security guards here and there. We didn't really have black police officers back in the days up until maybe the late 80s, late 90s, shit like that, right? And then that's when the taxi industry began. So when the taxi industry was invented, first and foremost, back in the days, taxis were flocking around the suburbs and the cities. Maybe in the townships and the rural areas, you'd only see maybe 2 taxis a day, or maybe 1 taxi a day that would go collect anybody, take them to work, and then come back again, collect other people. So usually back in the days, you would literally wait for a taxi for like maybe more than an hour so that the taxi could come by. And then sometimes when the taxi arrives, you find that the taxi is full, it's overloaded and stuff like that. There's no space. You heard the story where people were sitting on the engine back in the days, right? Because of overload stuff. So as people in the townships began to buy taxis, townships and rural areas, they began to buy taxis. What happened was the taxi owner would employ a certain person from the township to work for them, right? And then maybe late, around 8:30 p.m., the driver would come back with the money and park the taxi, and then maybe the following day do the same thing. So basically he's working for a certain person. Maybe that certain person is somewhere at work doing whatever he's doing. And then what happened was, eventually taxi drivers began to start fighting for passengers. I'm talking about back then in the 90s now. In the 80s, in the 90s, taxi drivers would fight for passengers and they would fight for routes. So this taxi war, it didn't start now. It started back then when there were few taxi drivers or few taxis in the townships, and then drivers were fighting for the routes and for the passengers. You cannot take people from this township, there's a taxi that can collect only people from this township and take them wherever maybe they want to go. And then there was this thing that was introduced that, you know what, if you own a taxi, now you have to pay a certain fee. Currently, I think now it's somewhere around 20,000. Is it 20? Yeah, I think it's 20,000, maybe more. So you can't just buy a taxi and then decide to transport passengers. So you have to register at the taxi association. So that one was implemented. And then eventually, taxi drivers began to overload their taxis with passengers and goods, And then there was that war where you can't just take anybody, you can't just overload. Meanwhile, there are other taxis are still coming, And then what happened was taxi drivers began to bribe. So that is why queue marshals were implemented. They were not implemented now. They were implemented even back in the days that there has to be somebody who's gonna control who is getting in the taxi and where is the taxi going and what time is the taxi gonna leave, and then in return you gotta pay them a certain fee, whatever. So a taxi owner might tell the driver that you know what, by the end of the day, sorry about that, by the end of the day, I'm gonna need 2,000 rands from you. How you make that 2,000 rands, I don't give a damn. You got a taxi, go to work. I wanna get my 2K at the end of the day. So taxi drivers began to overload, began to take locals, began to take anybody that they see in the streets. So somehow queue marshals were being disrespected, because at the same time, you guys need to understand that from the township to the suburbs, or from the rural areas to the cities, it's a long distance, and at the same time, the money is not enough, and then at the same time, again, the driver still have to make a certain fee for himself on the side, right? So taxi drivers began to overload their taxis with passengers, as I said. And then there's this thing of now taxi drivers paying bribes to the traffic cops, the police, because here's the thing. First of all, the driver doesn't own the taxi. And if the traffic cop finds you with an overloaded taxi, they're gonna confiscate it. And at the same time, since you don't own the taxi, you're gonna get in trouble with the owner. The owner's gonna be like, nigga, what the fuck is my taxi? And then you're gonna be like, hey, they took it, and only to find out that even the license disc has expired, all those stuff. So taxi drivers began to bribe our traffic cops, our police officers. So maybe we can say that taxi drivers are the first people who implemented bribery in the country. Taxi drivers are the first people who made bribery to become a norm in our country, because they didn't own the taxi to begin with, right? And then at the same time, as a cop, sometimes you cannot afford to look the other way. You have to take measures, and sometimes you as a traffic cop, you end up realizing that, you know what, I mean, I get it, we're from the same neighborhood. Just because I'm wearing a uniform doesn't make me different, because I understand your troubles and I understand your problems. So maybe just give me that cold drink money, because I don't even have shit to begin with. What's the point of me writing you a ticket? Meanwhile, I still don't have money, where there's another offer of you paying me so that I can buy my children some food, get myself some nice things, So that's when the bribery was implemented. And at the same time, taxi drivers were still fighting for the routes and for the passengers, right? Now, as time evolved, maybe in the early 2000s, somewhere 2010, maybe 2009, Ubers and Bolt, Ubers and Bolts were implemented in the country, where now instead of catching a taxi and at the same time, in order to catch a taxi, you gotta walk like maybe 2 miles, something like 2 kilometers, something like that, in order to catch a taxi. And then when you get there, the taxi is full, and then the driver is afraid of overloading the taxi because they're gonna end up coming across the traffic cop. Now you gotta pay another money for the bribery, or they might confiscate the taxi that you don't even own. So what happened was Ubers and Bolts were implemented, and then now private cars can now transport people from wherever they are to their designated destination. So as that emerged, taxi drivers felt like, you know what, these people are taking our customers, and at the same time, they are charging them more than what we are charging them. So taxi drivers got angry that how can this happen right in our face? How can you take this person and charge them maybe $100 to where we're going? As a matter of fact, I am charging them $20. It didn't make sense. So the taxi drivers felt like they were being robbed during daylight. So to them it looked like a daylight robbery. So taxi drivers don't look at Bolts like a new way of source of transport, a new way of improving the standard of living for the community or the citizens or the public, because taxi drivers thought the only way to transport people on a public transport is through a taxi or a bus. So these motherfuckers who are coming here and call themselves Uber drivers and Bolt drivers, they got to go. So they end up chasing the drivers away. So now when you request an Uber or a Bolt, sometimes the driver be telling you that, nah, I'm not gonna reach that certain destination. Maybe I might drop you off at a certain place, because if they find me, they're gonna kill me, those motherfuckers. So, and now you gotta understand again that the taxi business or the taxi industry, it's run by mafias, right? Somebody would rob a bank or do some criminal activities, and then buy many taxis so that they can wash that money through the taxi industry. So what happened was, the taxi drivers again and the taxi owners again, they got angry with people who buy lots of taxis. So if you can find out right now, somebody who got like 10 taxis, maybe 2 are transporting people from here to town, and then other 2 taxis are working in another province, and other 2 taxis are working in a different province as well. So you can't have more than maybe 5 taxis that are transporting people to the same area. So taxi drivers and taxi owners were literally fighting over that how can all these taxis belong to one person? Meanwhile, our taxis, they take time to be full. We take time to make that certain money, that certain cash. Because of this motherfucker, he just comes in here and line up all his taxis so that he only can make money. So not even taxi owners, taxi drivers got angry and mad that if they recognize a certain sticker of a taxi that's been going from this place to that place, and this other one taxi is the same sticker, those taxis are belonging to the same person, they would fight you for that. They'd be like, no, you gotta wait for maybe 5 taxis to pick up passengers until you can come and collect passengers, because the first taxi of yours already picked up passengers, right? So you cannot line up your taxis so that they can only carry passengers. Meanwhile, other people have taxis, and at the same time, drivers, like I said, drivers don't own the taxis. The taxi owners, they be like, nigga, I want 2K or 3K by the end of the day. How you make the money, I don't give a damn. So now it's taxi drivers fighting one another. From taxi drivers fighting one another, now it's taxi drivers fighting against Uber drivers and Bolt drivers, because they be like, nigga, you're gonna charge one person $100, meanwhile I charge one person $20. Do you know that if I can carry 5 people, it's $100? So if you carry 5 people, it's $500. You must be out of your goddamn mind. This shit is not allowed. So taxi drivers got mad. They were like, nah, we cannot tolerate this thing of you charging one person $100, meanwhile we charging our people $20. And then that's where eventually the taxi industry began to increase its price, maybe by 2 rands, 3 rands, according to different destinations and shit like that, right? Now, Uber drivers and Bolt drivers began to be like, anybody that's gonna request late at night, they must pay cash. We don't give a damn if you paid via your app or you got a reward or your a token whatsoever. You have to pay cash. So eventually, Uber drivers began to force passengers to pay cash late at night. And some Uber drivers are kidnapping people late at night. So they would kidnap you. Basically, you might think you are requesting for an Uber, and then when the Uber arrives, they fucking kidnap you. After kidnapping you, they be like, give us all the money that you have. They make you transfer all the money that you have and go and leave you somewhere in a ditch where it's fucking crazy, right? So eventually, it kind of made taxi drivers look bad, because it's like taxi drivers are letting all this shit slide. So taxi drivers began to kill other Uber drivers. They were saying, enough is enough. This shit is not allowed. You are not supposed to carry passengers. Even right now, taxi drivers are saying that any private car that's moving in the streets, it has to carry maybe 1 or 2 people. And you have to account for those people. Who's this person? Where are they going? Is it your family or what? If it's not your family, they gotta get into a taxi, because taxi drivers are no longer making that amount of money that they used to make, because now Uber drivers have taken the industry, and at the same time there are so many taxis in the streets. So taxi drivers are fighting for routes, taxi drivers are fighting for passengers, and taxi drivers are fighting against the Ubers and the Bolt drivers, because they charge passengers high money, expensive money. So what happening is the fact that the Department of Road and Transport, the Department of Road and Transport is even afraid of the taxi drivers, because you know why? The taxi industry is run by the mafias in the country. Okay, like I said, some of these taxis, they were bought through blood money. They were bought through money heist. So the taxi industry is a laundering business. Anybody who got more than 10 taxis, that motherfucker is laundering money through that association. So now, where does it all end? When taxi drivers are fighting one another, and at the same time, taxi drivers are killing Uber drivers and Bolt drivers. Where does it all end? As the public or as the commuters, are we safe? Because these motherfuckers are fighting over our money. They act like they are fighting for us. They act like they are fighting for our rights. But instead, They're just killing one another, man. For the money that we gotta pay. Remember, everybody has a choice whether they're gonna catch a taxi or whether they're gonna request an Uber. And remember, catching an Uber or requesting an Uber, it's like you just wanna have an interesting and a comfortable journey, because you know the taxi drama. Whenever you are in the taxi, somebody's gonna act crazy, or somebody's just gonna be dramatic or give you a certain attitude, or maybe people are afraid of counting the money in the back seat, in the front seat. So you just don't know what the fuck's going on, what the fuck's happening. But these things, it all started back then. But then, because now it has escalated to a point where taxi drivers are killing Uber drivers. And what I've realized is that most of the Uber drivers are illegal immigrants. I can tell you that most of the Uber and the Bolt drivers are illegal immigrants. Any person who's from South Africa, who's in the Uber or the Bolt industry, they're just doing that for a part-time. It's like a hustle. But those who are in it for the full time, that thing, most of them are illegal immigrants. Or maybe they are not illegal, but they are foreigners. Maybe taxi drivers are killing Uber and Bolt drivers because most of the Bolt and the Uber drivers are not from South Africa. Most of them are Nigerians. Most of them are Zimbabweans. So maybe taxi drivers are fighting for that. How can you come in our country and try to charge our people this huge amount of money? Meanwhile, we still have taxis in our country. This is our job. And you trying to take our job? Nigga, fuck out of here. Maybe that's how they see this whole thing. But I don't know. It's a bit tricky and it's wild. But I don't know. All I know is that the taxi industry, it's funded by drug money. The taxi industry is funded by drug money, and the taxi industry is funded by money heist. So it's the taxi owners that are greedy, not the taxi drivers. Taxi drivers, they just gotta fight for the routes and fight against drivers that are, I mean, it's like the taxi industry has its own rules and regulations. And if a driver is not respecting the rules and the regulations of the industry, we gotta do something about you. It's not even about the owner. The owner sometimes doesn't even know what the fuck is happening in the streets, because it's these damn drivers who are taking matters into their own hand. The only thing the taxi driver wants, the only thing the taxi owner wants is to get his cut by the end of the day. That's all that is. That's all that is. So I don't know, where does it all end? Is it even gonna end? Kinda crazy, ain't it? Kinda crazy. I don't wanna devil a lot in that topic because it's deep. It's deep, so I don't know, man. I think I tried to articulate what the fuck is happening in the taxi business and in the taxi industry. So this is me and this is you. I'm out like a motherfucker, man. Peace out.
Trejo Tebugo from Turfloop, but currently residing in Brakpan. I'm a scriptwriter and a filmmaker. I've always wanted to study film and TV production, but due to lack of funds, I ended teaching myself how to write scripts, shoot, edit, and direct short films and podcasts. I started a YouTube channel, LungTrey Studio, where I shoot short films and podcasts on my Samsung